Theme 3, Session 1: Methods of Fooling the Population, or how people are convinced to act against their own interest. A very important for everyone question is how not to be fooled. It's important at work, business, and family life. Political technologists and propagandists know well how to construct a syllogism so that the majority is caught in the web of pseudologic. This type of syllogism is mainly created to deceive you, forcing you to do something without realizing it, and accept two false assumptions because you're looking at the conclusion, which is true. Therefore, you think the premises must be true. But this is not always the case. The main thing to remember is the basic rules, namely, that if all the premises are true and the logical process is true, then, and only then, the conclusion will be true. We're now doing something that has never been done in the history of civilization. We're building science from public assumptions and reasoning. We're building a science defined as the science of the interaction of beings with free will. The etymology of the word will be the Latin term volo, meaning I will, coming from the verb velle, meaning to want. And will is defined as the act of volition or choice. Given the fact that our entire world of physical technology is built on the standards of truth plus permissibility, if this has been so successful in the physical sciences, then we are essentially saying, why don't we apply it also to the third science of beings with will? I think that would be a rational approach, but perhaps I should define rational. Rational means that it's true and permissible. Rational basically means that same thing as being absolutely right in physics. In other words, rational means that all the premises are true and the logic process is correct. Rational action is simply any action based on true premises and valid logical process. A rational person is one who always strives to use rational thought process. In other words, to arrive at conclusion based on true premises and valid thought process. Being rational does not mean, however, that you have to be 100% perfect. It's impossible. My humble opinion, of course. Everyone makes mistakes. How do I avoid making mistakes? Many people are so afraid of making mistakes that they do nothing, and their life becomes an endless error. Their whole life becomes an error because they're afraid of failure. I will now introduce another concept. An intellectual is someone who always strives for rationality. There are actually four types of intellectuals: a genuine intellectual, a pseudo-intellectual, an amateur intellectual, and partial intellectual. A true intellectual, though not perfect, may not be a school graduate, but he strives to draw conclusions based on true premises and legitimate thought process. Pseudo-intellectual, a very common type, may have the trappings and facade of intellectualism. He may have all the right buzzwords, however, if asked to explain his terms, he is often at a loss. He is a pretender, my dear ladies and gentlemen. The true intellectual in the physical sense was Albert Einstein. But he was a partial intellectual. This is very common among those who practice the physical sciences. They apply their knowledge of what is correct only to what they call science. They think it can be applied outside of physics, which is a common position among those involved in the physical sciences, so they don't even try. Outside the physical sciences, Albert Einstein did not apply truth and validity as an effective standard. It is important to understand that the standard of correctness, truth plus validity, is simply an intellectual tool that is used to discover the nature of the universe. This is a very practical reason to use this tool. It gets results. You simply cannot build anything useful on a false promise. You cannot build anything useful on an invalid thought process. If you decided that the Earth repels instead of attracts, your airplane, I am almost sure, will not fly. If you will decide to build your society on an idea of changing humans into angels, guess what? You will fail. Now let's clarify the term wrong. Wrong means that it is not right. Wrong means that either the premises are not true or the thought process is invalid, or both. A standard of correctness based on truth and validity is an absolute standard. This means that it's independent of your preferences. Please pay attention. It's an absolute standard applied in Africa, or you can apply it on the moon among Indians and Jews, people with one leg and even with no legs. Incidentally, if you reject the standard truth plus acceptable equals right, then frankly you should reject everything that is built on this standard. Bring back the TV you purchased, the refrigerator, the car, the toaster. They're all derivatives of true plus acceptable equals right. The next important question is, will this rule work effectively outside of physics? Can the same standard be used in the social sphere? Can it be used to determine whether a person's actions are correct? Can we extend the absolute standard of correctness in physics to the social sphere, to everywhere? Physics is a subject that deals with the nature of physical phenomena. And since the phenomenon is physical, it is easier to make predictions. Physics relatively is a simple subject. For example, if a stone is at rest and no external force can act on it, where it will remain? At rest. If the stone is moving, there can be one reason only. Some forces act on this stone. And if we know the forces acting on the stone, we can predict, for example, where and when the stone will land or where it will be at a certain point in time. In physics, we can accurately predict future events if we know the forces acting on an object. We can make predictions about lunar eclipses and solar eclipses with an amazing accuracy. With a person, everything is more complicated. Even if he is at rest for some time, he can leave the state of rest for a good 10 different reasons without any force applied to him. For example, he got tired. Stone will not move because stone doesn't have free will. But more on that later. Now, let's have a break.